Hey everyone, welcome back to the DGA YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the history of decentralized games. I've actually given this presentation one time before, so there's a chance you've already seen it, as I gave it during a live stream for the Chronicles game. Just to let you know, I've been doing a little bit of work with the Planetarium team who build the Chronicles game, and I took some of that time to basically build this presentation and then present it to that community. So let's just have a little bit of a recap about what a decentralized game is. What is it that we're actually really interested in, or what is it that we call a decentralized game? So quite naturally, you should expect it to look decentralized, to feel decentralized, and that's where we say that it should have distributed planning and authority, and therefore to resist single points of failure. We're only interested in computer games and of course those that use blockchain technology. For us, that's what a decentralized game is. Of course, you could argue that things like tennis or football can also be decentralized because anyone can get together and play those games wherever they want. They don't need some sort of central authority telling them how to play. However, we're not going to be focused on that. This is the agenda that I prepared here for this presentation. I'm trying to split the different eras of the games, or rather split the games into different eras. Of course, it's a little bit arbitrary, but when I go through the presentation, you'll kind of understand how there are sort of naturally three different eras, maybe even arguably four, but let's just say that there's three. So I'll take you through the prehistory, so leading up to the first decentralized game. Then the first decentralized game was actually during the early efforts in 2014. And then I'll present the last section, which is actually the longest. And I'm basically going to give examples as I go throughout. So this one's not deeply technical. It's more or less just to say what has been done in the past already and give a little bit of a glimpse of what's going to come in the future. And of course, a little bit of what we have now. So the prehistory. Interestingly enough, back in 2009, whenever Satoshi released his original Bitcoin code, he included some code for a peer-to-peer virtual poker. So it was actually included inside the source code of Bitcoin. And I thought that was pretty interesting because for me, that could even arguably be a fully decentralized game at that point. I don't really know enough of the code to say, and I'm not sure if it was ever finished, but at least it's the start of something. The code is actually online, so you can dig into it and see how it looks. After some discussion with the community, I think the community basically suggests that he shouldn't keep it in, that he should take it out and just keep Bitcoin purely as Bitcoin, the currency, basically. In 2010, there was a post on the Bitcoin Talk forum, a pseudo-anonymous poker tournament. I'm not sure of the exact details of how it worked. I can try to provide a link so you can read the forum post. It still exists. I don't think it was fully decentralized at that point, but there's some aspect of trying to link cryptocurrencies and gaming, and I thought that it was an interesting point of history that I wanted to raise it, basically. In 2011, we had the first altcoin, or the first blockchain or cryptocurrency after Bitcoin, and that was Namecoin. It's a decentralized DNS, and I think we could argue quite fairly that those are the first NFTs. I don't know if you can trade the names, but certainly you can buy them, and then you own them for some period of time. It's not gaming, but it did use something called a colored coins approach, which was actually used in the very first decentralized game that I'm going to tell you about in the next section. The Namecoin team, it started out, I think, with an anonymous dev, or maybe one or two or three, pseudo-anonymous devs. But the project still exists. There are still some devs, but there's an overlap between the Namecoin team and a team now called Zaya, and it kind of shows you it gives you some interesting perspective that Namecoin in many ways in spirit has an overlap with decentralized gaming. I'm not going to say too much more on that. Last here for the prehistory is Satoshi dies. You would send a Bitcoin transaction in order to play. I don't know all the details. I didn't dig into it. It's a fairly simple gambling game, but from what I hear, it's not entirely trustless and so not entirely decentralized. But still, it's not that it's like complete rubbish or nothing like that. There's still some good things in there, but from what I can figure, it's not quite decentralized at that point. Okay, moving into the early efforts. So this is when we actually start to see properly decentralized games for the very first time. And so the very first one, and I think quite clearly the very first decentralized game, where it's using a blockchain, is Huntercoin. The Huntercoin game is actually still playable. It still exists. I think it runs on its own chain. You would need to check with the Zaya team. So the game was created by, well, they weren't called the Zaya team back then, but it's the Zaya team now. The founders of the Huntercoin project are still around. They call themselves Zaya now. They used a colored coins approach, which is what you see in Namecoin, and is actually what you see now with Zaya, now with their current technology and their current decentralized games that they're building. And I'm going to mention some of those later. Obviously, I'm not going to go into the architecture nor how their technology works in this video, but I already have a video that gives you a very high level look at how their approach works. I will try to remember to give a link to that. If not, you can find it in the history of all of the videos that we have here on YouTube. So this is, I think, quite clearly the very first decentralized game, and it's an interesting point of history, and there's many things to learn from this game. Things that were done well and things that were not done well. Moving on, not long later, so that was 2014 in February for Huntercoin, and then come May, there was another game called Motocoin, which is a 2D motorbike simulation game. I'm not entirely sure if it is fully decentralized. From some of the things I see looking around, it suggests that it might be, and I believe the code was, and maybe it still is, open source and available on GitHub or similar. I don't know the exact point of the game. I think you can collect coins, which were actually the coins, real cryptocurrency, the Motocoin. I think it had its own chain. And that in itself is kind of unique, but you'd play the game in order to get the coins, some sort of mining or human mining, whatever you want to call it. Yep, so it has its place in history, but I'm not sure myself if it is fully decentralized or not. But still, it's an interesting one to think about, and it's an interesting one to learn from. Come 2015, so this is April 2015, we have Spells of Genesis. It's a trading card game. It was first released on Counterparty, and now you can trade the cards on Ethereum. I don't know how much of the game logic would actually sit on either blockchain. So it may not be a fully decentralized game, but I think given how early they are and how early they were in thinking of gaming and connecting it with a blockchain, I thought it was worth mentioning them anyway. I'm guessing the game is still playable. I don't know. I haven't really looked into it that deeply. So the last game in this era is a game called Etheria or Etheria. I'm not entirely sure. This is one I don't know a lot about, and I think a lot of other people don't know about it either. It is a game which is open source. I believe all of the game logic is in a smart contract running on Ethereum. It has NFTs, and players would buy lots or hexes, and then I guess develop the hex. That's kind of the game. I don't know a lot about it. I've seen it on Twitter. I've interacted with, I guess, the dev on Twitter. We've had not a lot of chat, but next to nothing, I suppose. What I was chatting about was mainly about history of NFTs. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about which is the first. This team is trying to stake a claim on that. It's not quite right, but perhaps the first on Ethereum. So it probably is quite fairly, a fully decentralized game because it's on Ethereum, it still exists, it's still playable. I guess not much has changed or been done since it was first launched, but obviously it's pretty early. This is October 2015. Okay, that's everything from the early era. Now if we move on to the contemporary era, I will go into basically a list of the games which are here now and which ones are about to launch. We can kick off the contemporary era with CryptoKitties. I know it's kind of 4 years ago now. It's also not decentralized, as most of the game logic, I believe, is centralized, at least the important part. But it's important because of its place within blockchain gaming as a greater area of interest. It has NFTs in it, and they were the first team to use this ERC 721 standard. I think they even authored the standard, and were obviously quite famous for filling up all of the blocks with transactions sort of late in 2017. So they earn a place within blockchain gaming history, of course, and I think because of the overlap, because of the popularity, it is worth mentioning that CryptoKitties exists, even though it's not decentralized. Okay, moving on. Next up on the list is Ethernal. Now, I think the very first version of this was late 2019, but the version you can see on the screen, this screenshot, which was my screenshot, was from 2020. The original version of Ethernal actually had no graphics. It was all text driven. It was inspired by these text games, the text muds or whatever, from sort of the late 1980s. It's a multiplayer roguelike game. It was released as an alpha. It was live. It was open source in the sense that the game logic was inside a smart contract. It ran on XDAI, and essentially anyone could run the game or, access the game because it was running on XDAI, but the actual live running instance was on one of the developer hosted servers. Of course, all of that could be open source and everything, and the main code for the game logic is open source. And I think, it definitely earns its place within the history of, fully decentralized gaming. The code is open source now. It's on GitHub. I know there's a couple of people now chatting about this inside the DGA Discord channel. People are trying to figure out, can we get a live running version of the game again, some sort of forked version. So that would be cool to see. Okay, also 2020 is Axie Infinity. I think it launched early 2020. I don't remember exactly. This is also not decentralized, but I think it's also one of these games that's worth mentioning because right now it is the most popular blockchain game. I don't know where it'll be in 5 or 10 years, but right now it is the most popular. It's become way more popular than CryptoKitties ever was, and I think there's lessons to be learned here in terms of how they've executed on their project and how they've built their community. It is one of the largest gaming communities, I think, of any gaming community, which says a lot about what the team have done. Their Discord is one of the largest Discords in the world. They have 800,000 members that's now capped. So there's a lot of things that they've done right. They do have NFTs and they do have parts which are running on a blockchain, even though I believe the main game logic is running on a dev server. So that's kind of my reasoning as to why I think it's worth including Axie Infinity here, because it earns its place, even though it's not fully decentralized. So it adds some flavor, I think, to the presentation, some context. Moving on, also in 2020, Chronicles, which launched in October of 2020. This is a team based in Korea, known as Planetarium. I've been helping the team a little bit. I can't really take much credit for the game, and I don't, but I've been giving them a little bit of help in terms of setting up their grants program and some input on ecosystem development and growth. I hold some of the tokens. I'm not telling you to buy it or sell or whatever else, but I just want to make that clear that I am involved a little bit. The screenshot here is me when I was playing. This is me passing level 100. It's an idle RPG. there's combat, there's crafting, and there's a marketplace. All of the actions that I just mentioned, they're all basically transactions that will be logged onto their blockchain. It's a standalone blockchain, and every player who downloads the game will be running the node software to sustain the blockchain. And this is why it's definitely fully decentralized, because everyone is taking part in order to sustain the blockchain. And then, of course, the game UI, which is written using the Unity framework, and you can see here, kind of sits on top and it interprets the data that's on the chain. I mentioned in a previous video about using random number generation in order to determine some sort of outcome within a game, and here it's used by Chronicles in order to determine the combat in terms of whether you pass the stage or not. So okay, so the last thing I could say about Chronicles, it's one of the very few decentralized games that we have. It's launched, it's beyond alpha, I think, probably possibly beyond the beta. There's still more features that are lined up to come, but there's almost nothing else which is actually decentralized and could fairly say that it's launched. And that's why Chronicles has something of an important place within the history here. Next up we have Dark Forest. I don't think it's finished. I think it's somewhere within an alpha or beta stage. It is live, at least it's live in terms of it comes out in different rounds. So to that extent, it's maybe not like a fully live game. The first version, I believe, came out in 2020. It's an MMO strategy game, or sort of RTS. They use ZK snarks in an interesting way. They use that for the Fog of War, which I believe is the grey part of the map that you see on screen in the screenshot. And yeah, I haven't played it, so there's not a great deal that I can say, but the contracts, I believe they're open source, and the contracts run on XDAI, a bit like Ethernal. So again, also a fair example of a fully decentralized game, and it would definitely be interesting to see where it goes. It is becoming quite popular now within the Ethereum community. Obviously not quite to the extent that Axie Infinity has. A game which is not released yet, I think maybe it's going to be 2021, or maybe it'll end up being 2022. It's Soccer Manager Elite, which is being created by the Zaya team that I mentioned earlier, plus a company called Soccer Manager. It's a soccer management game. It's fully decentralized, and I think this one's going to be running on top of the Polygon blockchain. Zaya run their own blockchain, but their tech, their games could run on any blockchain. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of translation work that would need to be done, but the way that the architecture is that the games are essentially independent of the blockchain himself, with the caveat that there needs to be some sort of translation there, but it can be done. So this is an interesting one to be watching out for and to see what will happen. There is quite a lot of complexity here with the game logic and the way that it's created. More complex probably than any of the games that I've mentioned so far in terms of what can be done. There's the teams will be DAOs. It's possible for people, as the players, to own stakes within these teams. So we own some sort of stake within the different DAOs of the game, and I'm not entirely sure of what the mechanism is for earning. I think there might even be some sort of earning mechanism in there as well. If the team does well, then you can earn some sort of royalties. But that's super interesting. I think that's a really good example of where we can go with decentralized gaming and what we can do in terms of pushing the complexity. So this is going to be one to keep an eye on. Also from the Zaya team, this is a game that they've been working on for a little bit longer. This is their RTS game. It's not fully real time, but it's real time in the sense that players are processing turns at the same time. That it's in sync. However, it is essentially turn based in the idea that you will make some move and it'll take some time for it to be confirmed by the chain, etc. But there's some interesting things that can be done there in terms of trying to hide that in the background. The other thing here that's obviously worth saying about Taurion is that it's possibly more complex than Soccer Manager. I'm not 100%. It's the same team. And so essentially it would be the most complex, fully decentralized game that we have. There isn't a live version of it yet. There have been alphas or maybe it's betas, live versions which have come out for a short time. I believe that you could actually go into the game right now. It's just that there's no players because they haven't actually launched the game fully yet. They do these, what they call treasure hunts. They've done about 3 treasure hunts, I think, so far, where they encourage people to come into the game to sort of mine resources, take part of combat, and then try to find some prizes which are sort of hidden across the map. So that's pretty cool, and I think this is really showing what we can do with fully decentralized gaming. And I suspect that we might see it next year rather than this year, but I don't know for sure, and I don't want to promise anything because I don't actually know myself. So one to keep an eye on. The last game that I want to mention is called Conquest. This is being built by a team called Etherplay. Etherplay is run by Ronan. Ronan was the guy who started off with Ethernal. He was the first developer there for that project, and this is his new project. There is some overlap in style, I think, with Dark Forest, both of them being set in space and having some sort of combat strategy conquest in space. There's a live alpha right now. I don't know the exact status of it in terms of how playable it is, but there has been a playable version of it already. While it is alpha, I suppose, right now, here in 2021. I'm guessing it's going to launch in 2022, but I don't actually know. And I suppose, like many games, they'll launch into some sort of state which is good enough to play, but maybe not quite the final state of where the developer would like to see it, and more features will inevitably get added. So that's pretty much all of the decentralized games that I could think of. There's maybe a few more. Sorry if I've missed those out. But I think this is the main ones to give you an impression of basically where have we been and where are we now, and then a little bit of where we're going. Decentralized gaming as we see it with blockchains has not been, a thing for a long time. This is about 7 years old now. But for a lot of that time, there wasn't a lot of activities, so it's been very, very slow. And it's only now that we're starting to see more and more developers. And, we really, really need to see a lot more developers, to be honest, for the space to take off. And that's part of what we're trying to do here with the DGA. We're trying to bring people together who are building decentralized games. The main place that we have is a Discord that I'm mentioning on screen. I think we're around about 170 members now. That we've had a few more signups. This is the place I would recommend for you to come and to join and to take part of a conversation. The link will be in the description. You can also follow us on Twitter. That's where we'll try to post some news, like the main things, post links to the various YouTube videos that we're doing. We have a website. As I say in previous videos, I know that it's not great, but I feel that it's it's worth having a website, but it really needs some love, and we could do with some help to get that. YouTube, obviously, that because you're here. Obviously, I would appreciate if you could subscribe to the videos and like the videos, as I think that'll probably help the YouTube algorithm, and then hopefully we can spread this idea to more people. Lastly, there's a book that I've been working on. It's open source. It's on GitHub. It's not finished. It's a little bit raw, and there's still some more content that I need to create. But the main idea is I'm trying to distill all of the knowledge from the members that we have on Discord and put it into a single coherent place. A book is in many ways a better point of reference than a blog. Blogs are great for telling a story, but it's harder to go back into reference like a particular paragraph, whereas I can do that quite easily with the markdown that we have on GitHub. And so that's kind of the importance of the book, and I'm hoping to do some videos about the book in the future. So that's pretty much everything I want to say for this video. I'm going to remind you just one last time that the links for as much of this will be in the description. If I can't get it all into the description, I'll see what I can do in terms of putting it into a comment. If not, always come to the Discord and ask us some questions, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. Okay, thanks for listening to this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.